at least some.
Mr. Chair, may I clarify, were you asking broadly about state economic development portfolio or specifically about GoBiz?
I think broadly.
Okay.
Sorry, I think broadly in terms of state programs, but I know that there's a focus on GoBiz and those efforts. So your organization, in terms of state programs that exist, I mean, what is the perspective or view? Mr. Ayala says, not for us is somewhat of the mentality. I mean, similar, along the same lines, or
I think it's fragmented. I think that was a great way to explain it. You've got little pieces of economic development programs in different organizations or agencies and departments, and they don't necessarily communicate. Our hope, and candidly, we advocated for the creation of GoBiz because we wanted to have a state entity in the governor's office that had the ability to pull those programs together, and we rely on GoBiz to do that. So if one of my members has a question that we can't answer, and it's a business assistant question that deals with resources or what does the state have available, we call GoBiz and say, what do you know about this, in hopes that they can unearth what program might be out there that could help them. But it's not easy. And the question regarding access to capital, Tony did a great job several years ago pulling together all these state programs that have economic development financing. We put it in our website. We wanted it to be available for all of our members. Within a year, that had changed. The programs had changed. Not only fragmented, but also other organizations or other entities within the state not understanding the mission of economic development. We've talked about housing and community development has oversight for the community development block grant funds for small communities. These are the most at-risk communities that need this funding for economic development purposes, and I would argue that they don't understand the mission of economic development. And so even with GoBiz in the position they're in, I don't think that they have the political strength to say, hey, HCD, that money needs to get to the intended recipients.
Gerbax, I think that's a really good point. One of the things we've identified at CalEd is this recognition of economic development in the state. What does that mean? And we looked around, and there's not many certified economic developers in the state. So it's something that we're trying to address as a board, and are going to be rolling out some programs to improve the training for economic developers. Economic development training is not just for economic developers. It's for everybody. We want politicians. We want people that work within the communities to understand what that process is, because in economic development, there's so many people that are involved in the process. As we're working with a business, the different agencies that we work with, I mean, just in our county alone, there's 14 agencies plus utilities. And so unless you do this on a daily basis, you're not going to understand what it takes to build a barn. You know, you're not going to build many barns in your lifetime. It's going to be one, and it's going to be painful. And so we're not saying we want to make it easy, but we definitely want to make it less hard. And I think that that's what the challenge is. But I think to look at what, you have to think about how we interact with GoBiz as an example. My organization has a monthly call with the staff of GoBiz, both in San Diego and in Sacramento. We talk to them about the process that we're going through, the different projects that we're working on, and we give them a monthly report on the activities that are taking place. And they've been very helpful in helping us to address some of the challenges. We have letters of support that will come from the governor's office and invitations. I believe it was me that actually requested the first TEA application from GoBiz for the EB5 program. Guess what? We found out there wasn't a program or an application, so we helped develop it. And that's been successful, helping many communities. But I think it's really that interaction with the local economic development organizations. And what we're trying to provide at CalEd is, as I mentioned, that certification, that recognition, so that there is a team of people that are out there working with GoBiz and other organizations. But it was the right move to put everything under one house or under one roof. But we got to get it out there to the community, and that's the challenge. I think when you look at the matrix, look at where the tax credits are being spent, and then I think you'll find that it's probably closest to where the people that are actually servicing GoBiz, and I think that that's something that they're trying to address. How can they get out to the communities easier? And by the way, you have a program, but you have no travel budget. So how do you expect GoBiz to be able to get out to our communities? And so that's, I think, a challenge for a rural community like mine or the Inland Empire or as far as Siskiyou County in Northern California.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Chair, because I think I was a little too broad brush on that, because there have been some very valuable areas where the economic development portfolio of the state has been significantly helped our membership, especially in the line of permit assistance. We've seen significant movement when we have been able to reach out to the permit assistance team. But again, commitment and resources, there's 3 people for the entire state. So it becomes whoever can find them or whoever gets the problem to them. And we're not being proactive like some of the other states, like Michigan or somewhere else, where they'll reach out to that business and say, hey, we see you have a new business here. You're going to have this permit coming up. You're going to have this permit coming up. Let's get you started, or let's start to circumvent that process so that you're prepared for it. Again, we have seen some tremendous value in this.
And you add something important, I think, is that we also, it's important for us to hear what are the programs that we feel are working, and build off of that. So I allow for other comments, I guess, from other panelists if you want to have some input on that.
First of all, I'd like to address, I think Mr. Chow made a comment earlier that a lot of businesses are not aware of GoBiz and what those programs are, and I will agree with that. I think it's a real challenge that, and it's a marketing issue. I think that there's been a lack of really engaging with the local economic development organizations, the SBDCs, the workforce development boards, and helping them to market the programs. And I think the challenge is, as we know, many people work in silos. The success of my organization, I think, has really been, as we brought investment in our community, we realized that local companies were not benefiting from that. And we started a procurement program and actually went out to businesses and tried to find out why they were not applying to opportunities for contracting with these large companies. And we found out there were a lot of challenges. They didn't have access to capital. They didn't have the bond capacity. They didn't have a working relationship with the bank anymore because we're in the middle of a recession. They didn't have a trained workforce, and were not aware of the workforce training dollars. So we developed a program that actually looks at all those different programs together, and then listen to the businesses, find out what their needs are, and then introduce them. I will tell you that with the Cal Competes program, we've had 3 successful applications in Imperial County. They were all initiated by my organization. So I think the challenge is that there's definitely a marketing issue. I mean, we're not marketing it in a way that is broad strokes. We're actually finding businesses that need these programs, introducing them. I think what the businesses are telling us, they don't know what they don't know. What we want to let them know is there's opportunities out there, and we'll help them assist with that. And I know that if we have that approach, then GoBiz will step up to the plate and assist us in doing that.
Yep.
Yeah, I think looking at those programs that work is certainly a wise thing to do. At the same time, I think we need to look at not just where the boxes exist, but how we can blow up some of those boxes, because the boxes are very rigid, and the point of entry for communities of color in particular is not friendly in terms of helping those low income neighborhoods and communities of color connect to regional economies, connect to our regional industry clusters. We have 9 economic regions that have their unique traits and characteristics. But how can we help low-income communities of color and develop a synergy in 5 areas? Those 5 areas would be, of course, the access to capital. It would be the governance and the regulatory framework. It would be the workforce and education system, infrastructure, which certainly includes housing and transportation, and then civic engagement. And civic engagement really is where we have tremendous opportunities to take a triple bottom line approach to ensure that there are benefits in the area of equity, benefits in the area of economic growth, benefits in the area of environmental prosperity as well. Now, but but there are some caveats when we talk about triple bottom line on the equity and economic and environmental side. As we develop the performance metrics, we ought to look at equity as something that involves ownership and access in the process of developing this direction where we want to go. Because, again, we have had this top-down approach. And then on the in terms of economic benefits, it's clear. Either we're all getting some and having some fun, or we're not. On the environmental metrics side of triple bottom line, when we talk about in the environmental side, it's more important to talk about the environmental risk factors that are not just related to the ecology. Yes, certainly we want to have clean air and water to drink, but we also need to deal with the environmental risk factors associated with not having a job, the environmental risk factors associated with not being able to capitalize our businesses and create jobs in our community, the environmental risk factors associated with not having a safe community to live in and housing, quality affordable housing, so that our children can grow up and reach their fullest potential.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair. I was going to speak to your question on programs that we're happy about. Specifically, in working with GoBiz, there's 3 programs that stand out to me. One is their Business Investment Services Group. So when a lead comes into the state, it goes to this group. They do lead distribution based on the information that they've received from the business that's looking to locate here. They do an excellent job of getting the information out. There have been challenges because everybody wants that lead. So as a state organization, how do you decide who gets it? They can't do that qualifying, so they do share that lead, and I think that has its challenges as well. But it has been great for us to be able to say we have a state entity where the leads can go to. We have a one place at the state level where businesses can talk if they have questions. Also, specifically, the California Competes program, love the fact that it does have accountability measures. It has real metrics. It's asking for investment. It has clawbacks. It's recognized as a national best practice because of the way it was structured. Another program that I think really works well is their permit assistance. They've got CalGold back online, which is great. So if you're a business and you want to know what permits you need, go to the website, find out. Might not always have the local, but it will have the state level. Those are programs that I think work really well. And from a state association perspective, who sees GoBiz not just as members but as partners, one thing that I think does work well is they've been really good about reaching out to us when they need to tap into and get local input. For example, when they first started, the question about permit assistance, probably the biggest complaint that was coming from our membership is, permitting and regulatory is a huge problem. How do we address that? And they took the time to meet with our members and stakeholders, convene, and find out what is it specifically at the state level that you help with. And they've done that on multiple occasions. So I think from our perspective, we've had some really good experiences with their programs and the outreach, but acknowledge there is a challenge getting that information out to all the businesses and everyone that could benefit from it.
We have a question from the Vice Chair.
Ms. Houta, when in your presentation, as you ended your presentation, you made a statement about we're not in the business of helping business for the sake of helping business. So it sounded to me like you had a different definition of what that meant. So would you please explain your mission and how you came up with that?
Yes, so predating me, I'd like to say that I was the originator, but I'm not. We've always talked about economic development. I've been with CalEd now 13 years. I interned there in college as well. The definition that I've always seen and that I believe in is a broad definition. Economic development is the creation of wealth through which community benefits are created. So when we talk to local jurisdictions, let's say we're talking to a city in particular, we'll say, look at your budget. Where's your revenue coming from to support what you need to support, whether it's your employees, your pension, or the services that your community and residents want. If that money, if the majority of that income is coming from business, why not help expand the opportunity for the businesses in your community. Assist them so they can thrive, but assist them so they can thrive in a way that's consistent with your community fabric, right? So it might be that, you'll get a lot of income if you bring in a Walmart, but that's not consistent with your community. Maybe your community doesn't want that. They value more boutique retailers, or maybe they're looking for science and technology. They want different types of job creation. So it's much more thoughtful. It's not just, let's go out and get every business we can and move it to the community. It's a real it's a visioning process. It's a community building process. And economic development is the tool that helps you get there.
Mm-hmm. So the business environment or business climate is also an important factor. Would you agree or disagree?
I would absolutely agree, yes.
Follow-up question. Has the CalEd's role changed or evolved over time, and especially with the GoBiz? Since you've been working with them since its inception for the last 5 years or so, what have you seen evolve, or what difference between the original core mission versus how it's evolved over time?
So great question, and thank you for your interest in the organization as well. So the organization was really created to support practitioners. So we don't do economic development necessarily. We're not the ones that are working with businesses. We're really still supporting our core mission of educating folks about what economic development is, what's the value, sharing resources. Now, since that time, we've created a couple of entities and programs that provide direct support on economic development. One is we do technical assistance for communities that are having specific issues around economic development. Might be that they have a downtown that they're struggling with, and so they need us to come in and give them advice on how to revive that downtown. We also have financing programs like the revolving loan fund that I mentioned. So we see those as programs that support our membership and the general cause for economic development. But with GoBiz there, now we have a state partner. So I don't think our role has changed too much from where we were. We've added on additional services, but more because what we see happening in the environment. Additionally, and you guys are probably seeing this in your own districts, there's a huge churn and change in what's happening locally with economic developers. So there's communities where we don't know who's working on economic development issues anymore. They don't necessarily have the title of economic developer, community developer. We don't know who's working on real estate transactions for economic development anymore. A lot of that staff either moved or went away because of the loss of redevelopment. We are currently in the process, we've engaged with an independent research group that's contacting all the jurisdictions so we can find out who's doing economic development, who's working on these projects, and then doing a needs assessment to figure out what kind of assistance do they need. Now, it could be that what comes out of that is that we do have to change. We plan to share that information with all of our stakeholders because it might be great information for you to know that, look, across the state, we're hearing this resounding message from the jurisdictions that this is the type of help that we need. But we do expect to see more changes.
Yes.
Maybe one last question. What do you see as the key mission and purpose of GoBiz existence? Is it more domestic, as you mentioned, Mr. Tim Kelly? GoBiz, I think you mentioned that it exists to support and have California compete with other states, or is GoBiz there to also support to compete internationally? Because our jurisdiction of this committee also includes international trade, and in my district, I have robust businesses, and especially with the implementation which is in place right now with the U.S.-Korea free trade agreement. We have many businesses that are very successfully establishing their presence here, but at the same time, as I talk to those companies, they want to come to the United States. I'm trying to encourage them to come to California and to my district, but there is no vehicle. And when we try to direct them to go to GoBiz to find information, it is not ready to support what we're planning on doing. As you know, the California Trade Offices closed down in 2003, and we just opened one in 2013 in Shanghai. And I'm looking forward to our follow-up hearing with GoBiz 2 weeks from now, so we can delve more into those details. But having said that, I just wanted to go back to ask my quick question. What is your thought process when it comes to what is GoBiz's role in that?
I think we'll all have maybe something different to say, depending on which organization you represent, and I represent many. But from the marketing standpoint, from Teague, California, which I'm currently the Vice President of International Trade and Investment, my organization probably does more marketing outside the state and outside the country than most other economic development organizations in the state of California. And the reason why is because we have to. People don't come to us. They don't put on a map and say, we're going to go to the Imperial Valley. I have to introduce my region to other areas. But I think California is a very, very powerful name. Every place we go, then people are talking about California. And usually they're not saying good things. And that's why we need to be there. Because we need to support what we're doing. I mentioned the diversity. We know that, I say this wherever I go, California is such a big state that, if there's an earthquake in San Francisco, they think the entire state fell down. If there's a fire in Yosemite, they think the entire state burned up. If there's a drought, they think that there's absolutely no water. And that's just not the truth. And because we are a large state, that everybody is competing against us. And they're trying to tear us down because they're trying to attract companies to come to their state. And that's the nature of competition. But we need to play that game. We need to be there. And Team California was actually developed because of the need under California Trade and Commerce to be able to go from budget to budget from the state of California. As you know, you can't carry over money. But when we're developing a strategy and determining where our marketing is going to be, we're planning 3 to 5 years in advance. And we have to put money down anywhere from 2 to 3 years in advance. Otherwise, we're going to be at the largest trade show in the back corner. We want to be at the largest trade show in the front. That's where California should be. So, in my opinion, from the standpoint of Team California, we need GoBiz to support us in those efforts. And if there is no budget, then we need to be able to be engaged that every place that we are, we have a picture of the governor, and we have documents from the state of California marketing the activities of GoBiz as we market our local communities. Now, I will tell you, I have no problem being shoulder to shoulder with my local economic developers in the state of California. We respect each other, and we realize that companies are going to go where companies go. But they're not going to go if you're not there. And that's where we need to be. I would say that our tradition with Team California is carried on with private investment. We would like support from the state. We're not asking for it, but we think that there's opportunities to leverage resources. And that's what we're looking for, is to be able to work closer with GoBiz, not only on a national, but also on an international level.
Thank you.
I think Tim's one of the greatest advocates for the state of California as far as bringing in foreign investment and stimulating economic trade. Again, he's been a true advocate, and you're right. He's from Imperial Valley, and so it's not the first place you think of. And I haven't seen it on any one of the travel and tourism commercials either. I think that we need to look at, again, some of the resources and where we have value. Case in point, as Gerbax had mentioned, where do we find our strengths? We know the strength of this economy is the small business economy. Fastest growing segments are women, Hispanic women, black women, Asian women, African American women, and yet where are our resources going in support of that? We're not providing an adequate environment to spur that growth. I do believe, though, that GoBiz is finding its form and function as well. I'm not always a big fan of the LAO, but they put in some good questions in there as far as when an organization begins to grow so rapidly and has so much attention. I believe, 10, 20 bills that have been attached to GoBiz thus far, and each time it's something new that they have to deal with, compete with, and build into their structure. We did a comparison of other states. at the time when I was there, and we brought out other forms of economic development entities. And in my opinion, I think it needs to go more of the hybrid public-private entity, similar to Texas, New York, and some of the others, so that it can be allowed to have be a little more fluid and yet raise its own money and promote as needed for the state, and not just on a political basis. So I think, again, each year, as something gets added to GoBiz, the mission begins to change and move and direction and so on and so forth. So I think they're doing the best with what they have, but they've been thrown quite a few responsibilities, and I think they're going to need to be strengthened.
Yeah, and I would add that, all of us on the panel are doing I think wonderful work, to toot my own horn, from Tim to Gerbax to Joel and others who are not even in the room. In terms of what GoBiz can do, GoBiz can be a facilitator and a capacity builder, but partner with grassroots to convene the stakeholders and roll out programs to help build businesses and address the policy gaps. At the Urban Partnership, we know who the community developers are. We've done assessments of what their needs are. And we need, quite frankly, at this point, to do more than put out information. We need partners. We need all of you and your districts. We need partners in a collective impact process that is a nonpartisan process of basically building a supply chain, if you will, for community, multiple community-based organizations, economic development corporations across the state who simply don't have the capacity on their own to bring about this synergy and capital and regulation and workforce development and infrastructure so to help us develop as a community-based, region-based, statewide-based supply chain of service organizations where, we really are splitting up and building on our strengths in the area of research and development, in the area of manufacturing, in the area of distribution and marketing, and do that in not just from a business context, but in a community-driven context. In terms of GoBiz, I think when we look at how to measure their results and how to make sure we're going in the right direction, I'm a former governor's appointee to California Technology, Trade, and Commerce Agency. And when that agency was eliminated, it involved a number of ramp downs. But one of the things that we found with the LAO and the state auditor is that there needed to be connecting metrics to strategies in a way that engages the state auditor and the LAO in planning evaluations of programs. Because, one of the things that happens is the legislature writes the policy and then it's implemented at the agency level, but those agencies don't engage the LAO or the state auditor in planning the evaluations. And so what happens is when it's time to either shift or fix or modify, we get a report that says, well, you weren't effective in this area or that area. But if we had taken a proactive approach in the beginning to plan the evaluation, we would be able to be in a much better position.